will actually hand the spreadsheet to a candidate that I'm interviewing. Oftentimes, I'll share it with them while they're in the waiting room, waiting to come in to be interviewed. Or if it's a virtual interview, I'll send it to them ahead of time. And I'll just ask them to briefly review the spreadsheet and let me know, first of all, their familiarity. Usually I'll ask them to do it on a scale from 1 to 5 for each of the tasks, and also to flag any task that they're going to need help with, whether that's because they've never done that specific type of task before, or they've not used the app or platform that is included in the notes. Welcome to the Successful Nonprofits Podcast. I'm Dolph Goldenberg. I'm a consultant, coach, and confidant to leaders at small and large organizations across the country. And I bring over 3 decades of experience building, growing, leading, and yes, repairing organizations. In today's episode, I am going to share with you one spreadsheet that every nonprofit manager needs. And now, my friend, you might be saying to yourself, Dolph, you're always saying that this podcast is for CEOs. Why in the world are you suggesting that we all use this one spreadsheet? The reason for that is because every executive director is a manager. Even if the person or people they manage is a volunteer, they are still a manager. And what I am going to share with you today is one spreadsheet that does 4 jobs for you. It will make recruitment, onboarding, performance management, and succession planning easier. I also will just remind you that I like to keep things really simple, so it's not hard to maintain and it's not hard to build. It is a 1-tab spreadsheet, and that keeps it simple. And by the way, it doesn't have a ton of columns. It's not 1 tab with 45 columns. It's 1 tab with just a few columns. Also, so that you know, I'm going to make the template for this available through the show notes. It is an editable Excel template, and you can find that in the show notes. At the end of the podcast episode, I'm also going to share the link for you. Now, how I first came up with this spreadsheet is that I was doing an interim executive director engagement. This is a few years ago, and I think it was about a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I was starting to work on the onboarding plan for a new employee who was going to be starting on Monday. And I had this realization that it would be really helpful for me to have a list of all of the tasks that this person would need to do, as well as the frequency, whether they were daily, ongoing, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or periodic. I realized that it would be helpful to have that for onboarding because it would really allow me to make sure that they learned all of the task-related activities that they were responsible for, and they learned how to do them. Once I'd created it, though, I had this realization that I should also be using the spreadsheet in interviewing. And so that's the very first use for you to use the spreadsheet. What I will do is I will actually hand the spreadsheet to a candidate that I'm interviewing. Oftentimes, I'll share it with them while they're in the waiting room, waiting to come in to be interviewed. Or if it's a virtual interview, I'll send it to them ahead of time. And I'll just ask them to briefly review the spreadsheet and let me know, first of all, their familiarity. Usually I'll ask them to do it on a scale from 1 to 5 for each of the tasks, and also to flag any task that they're going to need help with, whether that's because they've never done that specific type of task before, or they've not used the app or platform that is included in the notes. I've already shared with you that I use this spreadsheet in onboarding, but I've not told you the 2 ways that I do. The first is that it's a roadmap of what I need to make sure that person understands by the end of onboarding. Now, obviously, you also need an organization-wide onboarding where you have them fill out their tax forms and you make sure that they receive the employee manual and get to ask questions about it, etc. But this is a roadmap of the specific tasks that are related to their job so that we literally, as we go through onboarding in their first couple of weeks, we can check off, okay, we've discussed how you're going to do this and you've done it for the first time. Toward the end of onboarding, I will almost always share the task spreadsheet with the person again. And I will ask them if there's anything that they need additional training, coaching, or support to perform independently going forward. Now, this is critical. The critical word there is independently. Are they now able and ready to do their job without significant training or support? If there's areas where they still need some help and some support, great. We're going to provide that support. We're going to offer the training that they need. But once they're ready to do a task independently, this document also becomes a really important performance management tool. Now, as you can imagine, where I'm going with this, it makes accountability much more specific. They have signed off that they understand how to do specific tasks and they know what frequency they need to be completed by. So if something is not done in a week and it's supposed to be done in a week, then it's easy to have the conversation, hey, help me understand why this didn't happen. If there's a task that happens every month and it's not done by the end of that month, similarly, it's easy to have that conversation. But there's another way that it helps as well. So often, we or a member of our team will start a job and we've got a job description, and 6 months later, it's out of date. Either because we're using different technology, or the tasks have morphed, or another position's been added, and now tasks have split. Well, this task spreadsheet enables you to easily determine what work is actually being done and ensure that the job description is an accurate one. The fourth and final way that I use this spreadsheet is for cross-training and succession. First of all, let's talk about cross-training. As your team members start to complete their own task spreadsheets, if you realize that you only have one team member that knows how to complete a specific task, that's going to be a weak link for you. Not that that staff member is a weak link, but if that person leaves or has to take a leave of absence for an extended period, suddenly no one else there knows how to do it. So it's going to be important that you figure out how to cross-train on those tasks first. Additionally, as you're reviewing and approving everybody's new task spreadsheets that they've completed, this is also an opportunity for you to start to think about, okay, when someone leaves, whether they're leaving for another job or whether you're terminating them, as they are being offboarded, you know which logins you need to turn off. You should already have a list of those, but the task list is a good backup as well. Friend, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I'm going to walk you through how to easily build your own spreadsheets from the template that I offered, and also how to get your team to do them as well. In addition to that, I'll be sharing some practical and tactical ways you could be implementing your task sheet to make managing the team even easier. At the beginning of this episode, I shared that I am a consultant, a coach, and a confidant to leaders at small and large organizations across the country. I want to share with you a little bit about my coaching work. In my one-on-one coaching, which I do with nonprofit chief executives, it is practical and it is tactical. I help chief executives figure out how they can overcome some of the biggest issues that they're facing, whether those are issues with the board or HR or operations or fundraising. It is built for the real work that a leader must do to move their organization forward. If you're listening to this episode and wishing that you had a coach who could be helping you, please reach out to me at dolph@successfulnonprofits.com or through my website at successfulnonprofits.com. Welcome back, friend. Before the break, I promised you that I was going to help you build your own task spreadsheet using the template available through the show notes. Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write one for yourself. I want you to anticipate that it's going to take you 2 to 4 weeks to do it really well, and I'll explain why in a minute. But before I do, it's also important that you know once you've got your task spreadsheet, that you share it with your board chair. You're not going to share it with them as a first line manager where you want them to approve it. You're going to share it with them so you can have a conversation with the board chair about what you do and so that they have visibility into everything that you and your role are responsible for. Once you've got that spreadsheet, I also want you to share it with each staff member who reports directly to you and ask them to complete their own spreadsheet. Once again, this might take up to a month. And the reason for that is that most of us have 20 to 40 tasks that we're responsible for every single month. But if you asked us to sit down and write a list right now, half of them would not immediately come to mind. So it's important that they have the time to read their job description, to scroll back over the last year in their calendar, and that's time consuming. Additionally, even after they do those two things, there's going to be points where something else just pops into their head. So I would suggest that you give all of your team members a month to complete it, and then you just do a 2-week check-in. As team members are completing it, they will often have a few specific questions. I'm going to share those questions with you as well as how I answer them. I find it useful to share the answers to these questions as I'm asking people to complete their own spreadsheet. The first is there should be one sheet per position, not a sheet for every single employee. As an example, if you have 3 housing case managers, have them get together and fill one sheet out. Their manager might need to be a part of that conversation, but just make sure that they all gather and they fill one sheet out and they come to an alignment on it. The reason that is so important is it will ensure that everyone understands their job from the same perspective. Everyone's using the same platforms, the same apps, etc. The second thing to keep in mind is that the task is the final product. It is not all the steps. A good example of this is if your organization publishes an email newsletter. If you do, you probably have one staff member who's responsible for it, but there are a lot of steps that go into it. They've got to write the text, assign text to other people maybe, and then wait for that to come back, ensure that images are created or that they get images, enter it into the system, run a test, proof it, etc. Those are steps though. Those are not tasks. You want your employee to put just that task, publish the weekly email newsletter. That's it. Everything that feeds into it is important, but does not need to be on this spreadsheet. Because once again, what's going to be really critical is that this spreadsheet is easy to complete, easy to manage, and easy to maintain. When we ask our staff members to mark the frequency, they'll often have questions about a couple things. First of all, they might ask, what is the difference between a daily task and an ongoing task? Well, a daily task is something that has a beginning and an end. For example, checking the mail that comes from the United States Postal Service. That has a beginning. You go to the P.O. box or you go to the mailbox, you get the mail, you sort it, you distribute it. That's daily. An ongoing task might be monitoring the info at email inbox. There's no beginning and end to that unless you and your team member come to an agreement that you're only going to check it once a day. But at that point, it's no longer ongoing. It becomes a daily task. Additionally, people will sometimes ask, what exactly is a periodic task? Well, there are 2 types of periodic tasks. One are those tasks that are essentially triggered by a specific event. Maybe a board member resigns, and so you probably have an offboarding sheet of all the things that need to happen when a board member resigns. Maybe a new employee starts. Similarly, that's going to trigger tasks for you and some of your team members. In other cases, though, periodic events happen on their own clock, but there aren't enough of them to have their own column. As an example, if your organization has a trademark, you have to renew that trademark every few years. And if you don't, you lose the trademark. But it's not an annual task. It's a periodic task. You still have to make sure that it's calendared by someone and someone is fully responsible for it. Additionally, as people start to complete this, and they wonder how it's different from a periodic task that happens along a specific cadence or is triggered by a specific event. Well, a special project, it's definitely a part of the job. Somebody has to do it, but it's not a permanent part of the job. Some examples might be moving offices, rebrand, like a marketing rebrand, overhauling your website, implementing a new client database, or implementing a new fundraising database. All of those would be special projects. They have a start, they have a finish, but they don't happen weekly, quarterly, annually, or even periodically. There is a notes column in this spreadsheet as well, and it is going to be super important in completing that column that people keep that short and sweet. I like to suggest no more than 7 words, maybe the due date or who signs off on it or what app or system it is in. But when people start to write paragraphs or even sentences in that note column, this becomes a lot harder to keep up to date and a lot harder to manage. I've already shared with you that it could take a month for your team members to do this. So I would suggest that you ask them to do it in a month that's going to be slow. A quiet month gives them the space necessary to go back through their calendar for the last year, to carefully review their job description, and then to put it down for a week or two and come back later once they've realized that they forgot a few more things. Please don't forget that I need you to flag 2 things as you're reviewing and approving everybody's task spreadsheet. The first is identify those tasks that only one person knows how to do, because those are the tasks that you need to have another team member cross-trained in as soon as you possibly can. The second are any tasks that there are not currently written procedures for. An important part of succession planning is not just making sure you've got some cross-training, but also ensuring that you have standard operating procedures that are in writing for every task that is assigned to a position. You as the manager or the chief executive should not be the one writing those procedures unless it's a task that you owned and are responsible for. Your team members who are responsible for specific tasks need to be the people that write their own standard operating procedures. Once you've done all of that, you're also ready to use this spreadsheet as you prepare for annual reviews. It's pretty easy. You're just literally going to go through that spreadsheet and ask yourself how your employee is performing in every task that they're responsible for. It's easy for us to remember the 2 or 3 things that someone is underperforming in and forget about the 25 or 30 things that they're overperforming in. And this ultimately will result in a fairer annual review. It's not a bad idea to ask your direct report to do the exact same thing, especially if they're supposed to be developing a self-evaluation. Ask them to think about all of the tasks and identify the ones that they're rock stars in and the ones where they need to be bringing the bar up just a little bit. As part of the annual review, this is also a good time for you and your staff member to look together at the job description and determine if there's any new tasks that have been added to the spreadsheet that are not on the job description. If you do all of this, you are going to have a simple, easy to maintain spreadsheet that will help you with recruitment, onboarding, performance management, and also succession planning and offboarding. Once again, my friend, I have promised you a template, and I have a free template at successfulnonprofits.com/checklist. You can also access that template from the show notes in your phone, or you can forward those show notes to your email so you can download it when you're at your desk. That, my friend, that is our episode for the week. I hope that you have gained some insight to help you and your nonprofit thrive. And of course, the lawyers make me say it. I am not an accountant nor an attorney, and neither I nor the consulting practice provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please, if that is what you need, find a licensed, qualified professional in your area and get the counsel you need.